welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. Today we find ourselves in the book of Esther for episode 213. I've broken up Esther into 3 parts, so we get to hang out with her for a couple of days. Now, let's begin chapter 1, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I'm going to try to pronounce it the same way every time I say it. Here we go. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus, see, how do you do that? How do you say that twice in a row? Reigned from India to Ethiopia over the provinces. In those days, when the king, can we keep it at that for now, sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and his servants. The army of the Persians and Media, and the nobles and the governors of the provinces who were with him, while he showed them the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So I need you to catch this. He gave a feast for 180 days, 6 months, like a party for 180 days. That's excessive. I don't normally want to even go to a party for 5 minutes. I'm uncomfortable with crowds and like in groups of people. Like, you're just living there. You're just hanging out at this feast for 180 days. When these days were completed, the king gave for all the people a present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting another 7 days. So after the 180 days for everybody, he's like, what if I gave a special party for just my friends in Susa for another 7 days? There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods, and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on mosaic pavements, marble and mother of pearl and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And the drinking was according to this edict. There's no compulsion. So the king basically says, drink as much as you want, imbibe as much as you want. There's no such thing as too much wine. Drink it all. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to the king. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, because for the last 7 days he's been drinking himself drunk, he commands Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of the king, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was very lovely to look at. So after 7 days, this drunken king in this stupor is like, have you seen my wife? You gotta see my wife. She's gorgeous. Go and get her. And he sends the 7 eunuchs to bring his wife. He's like, bring her here. I want to show everybody how beautiful my wife is. Just utter ridiculousness, right? So Queen Vashti refuses to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. And then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure towards all who were versed in the law and judgment, the men next to him, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw his face and sat first in the kingdom, and he asked them, according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she has not performed the commandment of the king delivered by the eunuchs. Now, when he says according to the law, he's not talking about the Mosaic law. This is the law of the Persians and the Medes. So don't think Mosaic law. Then Mehuman said, Memucan, golly, these names. Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against the officials and all the peoples who are in the provinces. For the king's behavior will be made known to all the women, causing to look at their husbands with contempt, and they will say, the king commanded the queen to be brought before him, and she didn't come. So they say, this is a terrible example. She's setting a terrible example for all the other women in the kingdom. So this very day, the noble women of Persia and the Medes who have heard the king's behavior will say the same thing to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath and penalty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes. So you need to remember this from the book of Daniel, that once the Persians or the Medes put something into law, not even the king could undo it. It couldn't be undone. It had to be upheld. They couldn't change it, which is why Daniel ends up in the lion's den. And so it says, here's the law so that it can't be repealed, that Vashti should never step into the presence of the king again. Let her give up her royal position to another who is better than her. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout the kingdom, for it is vast, all the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. The advice pleased the king and all the princes, and he did as it was suggested to him. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, to every people in its own language, that every man be the master of his household and speak according to the language of the people. Now, after these things, when the anger of the king had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and had been decreed against her. And the king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins in the harem in Susa, the capital, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given them, and let the young woman who pleases the king the most be the queen instead of Vashti." This idea pleased the king, and he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem along with the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah. So Jeconiah, remember, was the king who was a king for 3 months, and then King Nebuchadnezzar came and took him into captivity. That was the same captivity where Ezekiel would have been taken into captivity as well. And it said he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, so Esther's other name is Hadassah, the daughter of his uncle. So some people will say that they'll say Esther was Mordecai's niece. No, Esther is Mordecai's cousin. And he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she neither had father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her in as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edicts were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the capital, the citadel in custody of Haggai, Esther was also taken into the king's palace and put in custody, who had charge of the women. And the young women pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and they advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made herself known or her people. So Esther has not declared to the king that she's a Jew, because Mordecai had said, "Do not make it known." And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to check and see how Esther was doing and what was happening to her. Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go into the king, there we go, after being 12 months under regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months they spent with oils of myrrh and 6 months with spices. So these women went through a beautification regime for 12 months before they could be brought in before the king. When the young woman went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go in to see the king again unless the king delighted in her and unless she was summoned by name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her in as his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except for what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the woman, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken to the king into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she won grace and favor in his sight, so that the royal crown was set on her head. Okay, I want to show you something here. We don't know the day, but it's the 10th month of the 7th year of his reign. And if we come all the way back up here, let me see if I can find it really quickly. Look at this. This is up here, 1:3. This is, we don't know the day, we don't know the month, but it's the 3rd year of his reign. Meaning, when he has a party for 6 months, in his 3rd year of reign, has a party for 6 months, Vashti doesn't come to him when she's supposed to come to him, so he removes her of being king. So we're towards the end of the 3rd year of his reign. It's going to be 4 years later, before Esther comes in to be his queen. I think we tend to read this chapter 1 and chapter 2 as though they happened right away. Pay attention to the dates. So the party's happening and happens for 6 months, then another week. Vashti does not come and present herself before the king, so he removes her. And then there's a year of purification when all the women are being gathered. And it takes him 4 years to land on Queen Esther as queen. So put that in your head, kind of hold that in there. Now the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. And the king gave a great feast for all of his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast, and he granted remission of taxes to the provinces, and he gave gifts with royal generosity. Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred, had not mentioned that she was a Jew, or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she had been brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting by the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to kill the king. And this became known to Mordecai. He told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told it to the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated, it was found to be so, and both men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles. Now, bear with me here. Here's Vashti, removed as queen. 4 years later, Esther is instilled as queen. In that time, however, the year that she's being pampered to become the queen, Mordecai is constantly outside the palace. He's outside the court, checking on her, making sure that she's doing okay. And so after this, he kind of hangs out in the courtyard, comes by and checks on Esther. She's not revealing that she's a Jew, but he comes by, checks on her. How you doing? What's going on? How is everything? He's not talking to her directly because she's the queen. So he's talking to the eunuchs or the go-betweens, her maids. And then at this point, while he's hanging out in the court, he overhears two guys plotting to kill the king. So in his kind of daily checking on his cousin, he sends a report to her, hey, these two guys are going to try to kill your husband. She then tells it to her husband, who finds out that the case is true, and he has both the men executed, and it's recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the king. Now that's important. We'll get to that in just a moment. After all these things, the king promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the other officials. So this guy gets a promotion. He's like the second most powerful person in the land. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate would bow down and pay honor to Haman, for the king had commanded that that be the case concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow down to him and would not give honor. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day and he would not listen to them, they went and told Haman to see what Mordecai's words, whether they would stand or not, for he had told them he was a Jew. So he's like, I'm not bowing down to him. I'm a Jew. I'm not going to bow down to Haman. So the servants of Haman go to Haman and say, hey, this guy's not going to bow down to you. And he says he's a Jew. Takes Haman off. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down to him or pay him honor, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, not just Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of the king. So when Mordecai hears that, when Haman hears that Mordecai is a Jew and won't bow down to him, he goes, I'm not going to just kill Mordecai. I'm going to kill every Jew that exists in the kingdom of my king. In the first month, we don't know the day, in the first month of the 12th year of the king, this happens. And they cast lots day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. And so here's what he says. So this is the first month of the 12th year. And Haman goes, I'm going to kill all these people. And he casts the lot, and he decides, I'm going to kill all these people on the 12th month of this year. Now, we've jumped forward. So we've jumped forward at this point 4 years and 2 months from the last time, from when the queen was made queen. So she's been queen now for 4 years. So there's about a 4-year gap from the first story to where she becomes queen. So about a 4-year gap from chapter 1 to chapter 2. And there's about a 4-year gap from chapter 2 to chapter 3. And so Haman wants to put to death all the Jews. So Haman came to the king, verse 8, and said, there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among your peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are very different from those of every other people, and they don't keep the king's laws, meaning they don't bow down to me, so that it's not to be the king's profit to tolerate them. If it's okay with the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver. Remember, a talent, 75 pounds. So I'll pay 750,000 pounds of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, and they can put it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money's given to you. The people also, do with them whatever you want. So Haman goes, I want to kill all these people, these wicked people that live among you. And the king goes, yeah, do it, man. And he puts it into law. And remember, it cannot be revoked. It cannot be revoked because even the king can't change his own law once it's put into place. So the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps and the governors of all the provinces, to every province in their own script, in their own language, and it was written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instructions to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to plunder their goods. So 11 months from today, kill all the Jews in the land. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. So 8 years have passed so far in our story here of Esther, and it's important to kind of look at those dates. We will pick up with the story of Esther tomorrow. We'll read the next 3 chapters. Join us then to see what happens. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.